Welcome everybody, I'm so happy to meet you here. Thank you all for finding time in your busy schedules to visit today's webinar. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Elena and I'm a food photographer, stylist and a blogger at Kitchen.Rocks. Food photography is my passion and I've come a long way learning and improving my skills. I created an online food photography course and hosted multiple food photography and styling workshops and one-on-one classes to help both beginners and experienced food photographers to get the hang of food photography. I'm happy to offer this free webinar for you to be able to quickly improve your food photography skills with a few easy to implement tricks and techniques. I know that your time is precious, so I will be straight to the point and I promise I won't waste your time. So what are we going to cover today? In this webinar, I will show you my go-to styling techniques and food photography setup. We will style a smoothie bowl with granola and then compose and style a shot. I will tell you exactly what is behind every decision I make when I style my shots. You will learn about what goes into the shooting process and lots of behind-the-scenes tips and tricks. In the second part of the webinar, I will give you the top 5 easy tips to instantly elevate your food photography without the use of fancy equipment and editing tools. My goal for this webinar is to give you as much useful information as I can in the shortest time possible. Are you ready? If you have any questions during the presentation, just write them in the comments below. Let's start with styling a smoothie bowl. We're eating with our eyes first, so paying attention to the presentation of your food makes a huge difference. Plating food might be challenging, so for those of you who want to improve the presentation of their food, the #1 tip would be try to tell a story of the food you're making in your presentation. You want to highlight the best things about the dish that you're plating. For example, when you're plating a smoothie bowl, think about vibrance, contrasting colors, shapes and textures that bring out the best flavor cues of a smoothie bowl. For this smoothie bowl, I have blended raspberries with bananas in a bowl, granola, fresh raspberries, hemp seeds, toasted coconut, peppermint leaves and honey. And my goal for this bowl is to make it appetizing with the minimum amount of ingredients and props. And I think it's really important not to overstyle your bowl, as it might look too cluttered or too geometrical, unless that's what you're deliberately going for. I don't want my bowl to look too staged. So I will start with this beautiful bowl of blended raspberries and bananas that I will top with all these delicious toppings. One thing to note here, make sure your smoothie is rather thick than liquid so that the toppings don't sink down. I want to position my toppings on the right side of the bowl, leaving the left side free from toppings so we can see the smoothie itself. What I'll do with the left side is I will create little waves with a spoon that will help me showcase the texture and volume of the smoothie. I will start with granola and I will place it on the right side of the bowl, right next to the edge. Okay, then come raspberries, just a few. Trying to pick the best looking ones. Okay. Next are the toasted coconut slices. Paying attention to how I position them. So they don't look flat. I'd rather want to see the edges, so it's not too much of them. And it's useful to have tweezers to reposition some of the elements. Okay. I like that this toasted coconut has a little bit of color to it that makes the bowl look fancier. Next come the hemp seeds. We just sprinkle them along the main line. Just like that. Perfect. A few peppermint leaves here and there. Yeah. Okay, and finally a drizzle of honey on top, highlighting the berries. I think it's important to leave some negative space to show the texture of the smoothie rather than add the toppings all around the bowl. I will explain a few concepts that I used in styling this bowl that you can apply to other dishes as well. First is the concept of contrast. We used contrasting colors, turquoise and pink, textures, smooth and crunchy, and later we will use daylight to create the contrast between highlights and shadows. The choice of additional colors for your food photo setup depends on the main color. So you can either go with analog colors or complementary contrasting colors like I did here with the smoothie bowl. I have a class in my online course all about color theory that offers a set of guidelines on how to combine colors using the color wheel to create visual appeal. The contrast of textures is one of the things that makes a dish delicious and complete. So when we visually see it, we assume that it tastes good. A contrast of crunchy and creamy creates a nice mouthfeel that makes us enjoy chocolate chip cookies or nachos with a dip. Here we highlighted the creamy texture of the smoothie with creating waves and lines and combined it with crunchy toppings. Generally speaking, the more contrast you have on your pictures, the better. So think about how you can use the contrast of shapes or the contrast of props and the food. Sometimes food really pops if you put it in antique dishes or on an old, worn wooden table. Now let's proceed to styling a shot with this beautiful bowl and see what goes into decision making here. I will introduce three concepts here: the concept of directions and lines, the concept of layers, and the concept of frames. Let's start with the concept of directions. You want to create lines on your picture to direct the viewer's eyes throughout the frame. And you do this by positioning the main elements of your setup strategically, creating a path of movement leading the viewer out of the frame. With this smoothie bowl, I wanted to create a diagonal line from bottom right to upper left corner, and I kept this in mind while positioning my props and working with the light later on. I will make a few overhead shots as well as 45 degrees angle shots, and I want my pictures to have vertical orientation to be able to use the space for the path of movements that we were talking about. I also want to have some negative space here in the frame and make sure I have just enough props and not too much. So with that in mind, I positioned the elements of my composition starting from the main one, which is the smoothie bowl. I put it in the bottom right corner of my setup so that it's clear that it's the main elements that start this path of movement. Now I want to introduce two more concepts that I used for styling of the shot. And first is the concept of layers. Remember when we styled the smoothie bowl, we first had a bowl with a smoothie that you can count as the first layer or the first and the second layer, and then came toppings as the next layer, and then a drizzle of honey as the next one, and the same we can apply to the overall composition. So I positioned this cheesecloth and the underplate with the smoothie bowl, making sure that the lines follow the direction I want, and that I had a spoon in the same direction and a few bowls with ingredients, and I took more raspberries for tossing around and a few of the coconut crumbles to fill in the empty space. So we create the setup layer by layer, making sure that each additional layer brings something to the overall image and doesn't distract from the main subject. And that will determine the choice of props that you'll use on your picture. And the last concept I used for styling the shot is the concept of frames. To better direct the viewer's eye within the picture, you can use frames or edges of bowls and plates or table, basically anything that creates a shape around the elements of your picture. And that was the reason I put an underplate under my smoothie bowl and added additional bowls with ingredients. So these are some of the composition tools that are very powerful and produce great results. A good composition can help create a masterpiece even out of not so photogenic foods, while a bad composition can completely ruin a photograph of the prettiest dish you can imagine. And the secret here is to make it look effortless and create a story behind a photo, making you think about it. But please keep in mind that composition is just a set of tools, but in the end of the day, it's your own creativity that brings the most impact. Now when we're done with styling, let's proceed to my go-to food photography setup. I position my table with a neutral gray background board on it right next to the window. I have my diffuser and my reflector here ready to use whenever I need them to manipulate the light. But first I will take a test shot to see whether I need to adjust the light or my settings. And I'm using side light here because I'm going for a rather even tone throughout the picture without too much highlights and shadows. And another reason I'm using side light is because I want to preserve the colors here in all their richness. In my online course, I have a whole module dedicated to natural light and how to use it to achieve the result that you're going for. An important point about the lighting: make sure you're not mixing different light sources. So don't you use flash or kitchen lights, just the window and the daylight. It's a good idea to experiment with different windows in your house at different times of the day. Sometimes when you're shooting at the middle of the day and the sun is right overhead, it would wash out all the shadows and making your picture look dimensionless. So the best time to shoot is when the sun is at a lower angle, so that you can catch more highlights and shadows that highlight the shape and texture of your food, making it look more appetizing. Clouds work as a natural diffuser, so you probably won't need extra diffusion if you are shooting on a cloudy day. What you might want to use though is a reflector that you can make from a white card like this. You need it to fill the shadow with light or to add reflections to shiny objects if that's what you're going for. To add more shadows and to create a more dramatic look, you can use a black card in the same way. And another idea would be to use tin foil to make the light more even. And you can experiment with positioning it at a different distance, different height and angle depending on the look you're going for. So you can hold it like this, or put it closer to the food and further away from the food to see where the shadow goes. So for this setup, I will first make a test shot and then decide whether I want to use a diffuser or a reflector at all. So I think I need a reflector here to bounce back the light a little bit and to get rid of some of the shadows on the right side. Yeah, and now it looks much better, I think. So now let's talk about the settings. I'm shooting on manual mode and you should do the same, definitely. My settings are now 2.8 for aperture, 60th of a second for shutter speed, and 100 for ISO. So in terms of settings, I would maybe adjust the shutter speed a bit. Because it's quite sunny, I would go up to 80. Yeah, and now I think it looks exactly like I want it to be. If you're not familiar with manual camera settings or don't feel confident using them, there is a whole module in my online course dedicated to food photography basics, including the exposure triangle, white balance, focus settings, and there is a live demo showing how to put it all together. It's the second module of the course, right after food photography equipment, and I think it's the most important one because if you don't know the basics, you're surely missing out. Your pictures could look so much better if you master the manual mode. So let's see the final result here. We made 2 shots, one overhead and one 45 degrees angle. Both have vertical orientation. We styled the bowl with concepts of contrast of colors and textures, and the setup is styled with the concept of layers and path of movement in mind. We left some negative space both in the bowl and in the setup for the eye to rest. We used sidelight to preserve the colors and make an even tone throughout the picture. The props we used are simple and contribute to the concept of frames that we were talking about. We made sure that each further prop does not distract from the main object, which is obviously the smoothie bowl. All of the concepts that we covered in this webinar are helpful and can produce great results, although they are completely useless if you don't practice. So here's a little homework for you. Try to create your own smoothie bowl or any other breakfast bowl and go through the styling steps I showed you in this webinar. To give you a little motivation, I will give each of your pictures constructive feedback if you post them in our Happy Kitchen Food Photography course Facebook group. You can find the link to the group below this video. To give you even more valuable information, I put together the top 5 easy tips to instantly elevate your food photography without expensive equipment and post-editing. I hope you find them useful and implement them in some of your food shots. So tip number 1, that is easy to overlook, is make sure that it is clear for the viewer what your main subject is. It should draw the attention and really pop. To achieve this, you can use narrow depth of field when your subject is in focus and the background is blurry, and there are 2 ways to do it. Either use low aperture numbers, or if your lens doesn't allow you to do that, you can position the props or the background board further away from your main subject. And it's important to think about whether every additional prop in the frame really adds to the picture rather than distracts. You can see on these 2 pictures that the final dish is drawing the attention right in the beginning when you look at it. You don't have to guess what is the main subject here because it's pretty clear, and none of the props are distracting or unnecessary. They just add the value to these images because you can see the story behind these meals, how they were made and what went into it. Tip number 2, don't be afraid of the imperfections, because that's what makes your picture interesting. Try to avoid your pictures being too symmetrical and too styled. Most of the times, taking a bite or adding a few crumbles and creating a little mess on your background board really elevates a picture. Look at these chocolate fudge shots. Although the fudge bars are square-shaped, that is usually not so easy to photograph, both of the shots look interesting, each in their own way. By creating lines and directions that we talked about and interrupting shapes and applying the concept of layering with very few to no props, you can instantly improve a picture and make it look appetizing. It feels like you are right there making this chocolate fudge in your own kitchen. Maybe you are with your kids and they made a mess with all these chocolate crumbles everywhere. That brings out the emotional component of this composition tool, which is also very powerful and mood setting. Tip number 3. An easy way to add interest to your food photos is to make an action shot. I go through this in my online course in details, both from the technical side and from the composition side. Sometimes it's very easy to make an action shot without changing the setup much. For example, you can hold a bowl or a plate in your hands. By positioning it closer to the camera and further from your background, you can create a nice effect that the bowl is sharp, crisp and attention-grabbing while the background is blurry. If you look at these shots, it feels like you are right there at the scene, that someone is serving you this butternut squash soup and corn on the cob straight from the grill. Notice that there are no props used in these shots, but despite that, both of them are telling a story and are visually interesting. Tip number 4. Catch bright sunny spots to highlight the texture and volume of the food. In case of the smoothie bowl that we shot previously, I drizzled a bit of honey on top, creating a glossy look that catches the light. It's also called specular reflection. With savory dishes, you can add oil or sometimes water for fresh veggies and fruits to make them look fresh and juicy. You can see on these pictures how the light is hitting the surface of these dishes, leaving highlights that give pictures texture, dimension, and volume. Sometimes it takes a while to find the right angle when these highlights are visible, so make sure to play around with positioning your background board at different angles to the light source and experiment with shooting angles as well. And the last tip, we talked about shape before when we styled the smoothie bowl. A very powerful trick to use, especially when shooting round dishes, is anchoring the dish to the side of the frame, intentionally interrupting the shape of the dish and making it more visually interesting. On the first picture, you can see that the round shape of this galette is interrupted by the edge of the frame, but also by a slice that is cut out. It was done intentionally to create a direction of movement throughout the picture. On this vegan bolognese sauce shot, the round shape of the skillet is interrupted on the right side by the frame. You can also see the lines that I intentionally created to direct the viewer's eye, starting from the wrinkled towel, going through the handle of the skillet, then the spoon, leading us out of the frame, with a little bowl of Italian seasoning that is also anchored to the frame on top. And these lines give the viewer a direction to move his or her eyes throughout the picture, leading us out of the frame and creating visual interest. I hope that these tips sound easy enough to implement for you. If you use any of them, make sure to post the result in our Facebook group. Now, if you're passionate about food photography and want to learn more, I'm offering you my online food photography and styling course. It is video-based and suits both beginners and experienced photographers who want to take their food photography to the next level. The course covers basic food photography principles, including camera settings, light, props, composition, styling, and so much more. This course is perfect for bloggers, small business owners, hobby photographers, creatives, or marketers that wish to improve their style and overall image quality. Each class comes with a video lecture and/or live demo that is perfect for visual learners, followed by a summary, additional materials, an optional quiz, and a homework assignment. This course won't take a ton of your time. The information is structured in the most efficient way and is perfect for busy people. When I created this course, I wanted it to be affordable and worth its price, making it a great investment for beginners or for experienced food photographers who struggle with the styling component. So my priority was to create an easy-to-follow and straight-to-the-point course that is not overloaded with unnecessary information. The course was just recently launched, so for those of you who wish to participate, I offer it now with a limited time 50% discount. Believe me, the launch price will pleasantly surprise you. The course is super affordable and has a great value for money. Make sure to enroll today to lock in your special price before it goes up. You don't lose anything because there is a 30 days money-back guarantee on this course. Don't waste any more of your time. I hope you enjoyed this webinar and got something useful out of it. And I would really appreciate it if you could write in the comments what was the biggest takeaway for you from this webinar. I'm really looking forward to your feedback and I can't wait to see your photos in our Facebook group. So wrapping up here, I just wanted to let you know how you can find me online. My website is Kitchen.Rocks and you can find me on Instagram at Kitchen.Rocks. The link to my online course is down below, as well as links to the Facebook group and my social media channels. Thank you all for being here with me today. Take care and see you soon.